Welcome back. You're listening to the Cindy Laverty Show on CRN Digital Talk Radio, and my guest today is David Kessler, world-renowned David Kessler. We're talking about Visions, Trips, and Crowded Rooms, his new book, What We See Before We Die. Okay, David, I think hospice needs a new marketing campaign. I really do. Most people don't understand it, and therefore it's really underutilized, isn't it?
Absolutely. You're not alone with that. So let's talk about some of the myths and things that people have.
Yeah.
First of all, hospice is a philosophy.
Okay.
It means dying your way on your terms.
Which is really what everybody wants.
What wouldn't you want about that? I mean, not that anyone ever wants to die, but when your time comes, you don't want to do it someone else's way.
Exactly.
So it allows for you to sort of, as we talk about, you've lived in character, you can die in character. Be yourself. Hospice is mostly at home. So
Yes.
nurses comes to your home, social workers come to your home, the physician will even come to your home.
And a chaplain.
And a chaplain, absolutely, to meet all your spiritual, emotional, physical needs, pain management, symptom management.
They also support the family, too.
Absolutely. The family is as much the patient as the patient is.
Right.
The other thing that's interesting is studies are now showing that people who go on hospice actually live longer. Because if you think about it, if your symptoms are well managed, if your pain is controlled,
Yes.
even if you don't have all the time in the world, what you have will probably be a little longer if it's not in pain.
Right, right.
So that's an interesting thing people don't often think about.
What hospice doesn't do is to administer treatment.
They don't administer aggressive curative treatment.
Okay, good. Thank you for
So
clarifying that.
if you're still looking for a cure, and you know it's probably not time, and God bless you, hope you find the cure, and if you don't, hospice is certainly there with aggressive symptom management and pain control.
And it's paid for.
And it's paid for by Medicare to send people to your home to care for you. It's really a wonderful underutilized benefit. And one of the things that people will say to me once in a while is they'll go, this is one of the big myths. Oh, you know that I don't want to go on hospice because the quicker you die, the more money they make.
Right.
And I say to people,
Right.
no. The Medicare system pays them a daily rate. The longer you live, the more money they make.
Right.
And most of them are nonprofits. We're a nonprofit.
Right.
So, I mean, if you're really out for the money, you probably don't go into hospice.
You're not going to go into hospice. What happens if someone is not on Medicare but is terminally ill, or the evaluation is 6 months or less to live, right?
It's usually a 6-month prognosis.
Right.
And we talk about that private insurance pays for it, Medi-Cal pays for it.
Okay.
Most hospices have a plan for charity, so that usually anyone who wants hospice gets hospice.
Right. Okay. So this is really a book about hope. For me, it was a book about hope. What was your intent in writing this after all your years of experience?
Two things sort of changed all that for me. One was Kubler-Ross, who'd been my teacher for many, many years, early on talked to me about deathbed visions.
Uh-huh.
And I remember sort of downplaying them. And I really felt like I'm trying, 20, 30 years ago, I'm trying to have some credibility and make my way in the world. And I didn't really want to talk about deathbed visions with her. And she said to me at one point when she clearly saw I was not into discussing this with her, she said, someday you'll be mature enough to talk about this and write about it.
Oh, well.
And I remember thinking, oh, happy birthday, Elizabeth. And so it's interesting to me that years passed, I saw sort of one family after another family talk to me about how their loved one passed and say, almost in a whisper, it's so sad that Grandma went crazy. And I'd go, well, what do you mean she went crazy? Well, she started talking to someone in the corner of the room. She thought her mother was with her.
Right.
And I realized this was a normal, common event that the dying were experiencing, but their family members thought
That they had
that
gone
they had
crazy.
gone off the deep end.
Yeah.
And then the other piece that happened personally for me was my father was dying. And he was very hopeless and just was so sad. And
This was after your mom passed away.
Yes, this is years later. And as a as someone who's dedicated their life to hospice, when your dad's on service, you sort of want him to have the best experience possible.
Right, of course.
And he was just having such a tough time and just so sad. And I realized I had to allow him his sadness.
Yeah.
And just let that be. And then I got up one morning and everything had changed. And he was happy. And I said, "What happened?" And he said, "Your mother came. And she told me I'm going to be seeing her again. And we're all going to be together." And he said, "And you're going to be there eventually." And I looked at my father and I realized here's a man who went from hopelessness
Yes.
to hopefulness.
Right, right.
That something had changed, that veil between life and death had dropped, and he had realized he was going to a place where he was going to have a wonderful reunion with people.
Right.
I thought about all he was losing, and he realized all he would be seeing again.
And that he was going to be embraced by
And that he was going to be embraced and loved.
Well, I've had, similar experiences when I have been in the presence of my loved ones who have passed away. I mean, there is this amazing calm. I mean, no one has ever verbalized to me, "I saw so-and-so last night." But I think the night before my dad passed away, he was really medicated heavily. And all of a sudden, about 11 o'clock, which is about 5 hours before he died, he sat straight up in bed and he was trying to talk to us. His eyes were open. And I know that room was getting filled up with people who had gone on but had come back for him. I just believe that. I don't care if people think I'm nuts or not. But
well, that's the visions, trips, and crowded rooms.
Yes, absolutely. Why are doctors so hesitant to acknowledge this? Because they must experience it all the time.
Well, it's interesting. I had a conversation with one physician in writing
And you
this
talk
book.
about it in the book.
And first of all, just so folks listening know, the book is, I knew that this just couldn't be from my viewpoint. So it's interviews with doctors, nurses, social workers, psychologists, priests, rabbis, healthcare professionals telling their experiences of working with the dying and how the dying have these three different phenomena they see: the visions, the trips, the crowded rooms. So I'm talking to this one physician and I said to him, "Why is it doctors don't talk about it? Because as a physician, you're obviously around the dying." And he said, "You're kind of mistaken." And I went, "But you're an oncologist." And he said, "You know what? We're kind of really in and out of the room. We're not really at the bedside as much as people think we are."
Right.
So we really don't have a working knowledge of what those last 24 hours, 48 hours, a week really look like. We go in, make sure they're not in pain, symptoms are controlled, family's there. And we sort of aren't there as much as people expect. It's the nurses.
Yeah,
that are
nurses experience this a lot, right?
They're the ones that are at the bedside the most.
Yes. So, but there are doctors who have seen this. I mean, you talk about
Absolutely.
one doctor in the book who said, "Yeah, it happens all the time, but don't tell anybody we had this conversation."
Right, right. Well, there is that credibility factor. People are afraid, you're going to be just considered a little, off the edge if you sort of discuss something like this.
Isn't that? And yet we go to psychics and we go to mediums and we go to, we're always trying to speak to the other side on some level, but at the end, we don't want to talk about it.
Well, at one point I was in an emergency room sort of discussing this, and sort of half the nurses and doctors were going, "Oh yeah, we see this." The other were uncomfortable. And all of a sudden I said, "Why can't we talk about this?" They said, "We've got to run. It's a full moon. It's going to be very busy." You believe in the full moon, but not deathbed visions. Okay.
That's a perfect way to take us to break. Stay with us. You're listening to the Cindy Laverty Show. I'll be right back.